The ancient hills of Apache land hold many secrets, but none as heavy as the one weighing on Todo's shoulders. At 35, he stands tall among his people, respected as a warrior, feared as a hunter, and now trapped by the iron chains of tradition. The council has spoken. The marriage is arranged. His bride, Nahimana, the daughter of his father's brother, his own cousin. Neither wants this union, their eyes revealing the same trapped desperation when the decision is announced. The elders nod with satisfaction, believing they've secured the bloodline's future. They could not see the storm brewing behind Teddy's stone-faced acceptance, nor the fire kindling in Nahimana's downcast eyes. Could a marriage built on such unwilling foundations become something more than a prison? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dawn breaks over the rugged mountains as Teddy moves silently through the forest. His moccasins leave no trace on the pine needle floor. The weight of yesterday's council meeting still presses on his chest, heavier than the deer he hopes to bring home. His fingers reach for the wolf tooth hanging at his neck, a habit when his thoughts grow troubled. His cabin appears through the trees, a simple structure of wood and stone standing apart from the main village. Just as he prefers to live, smoke curls from the chimney. Someone has entered his home. Approaching cautiously, hand on his knife, he relaxes only when he recognizes his father's horse, tethered outside. "You were not at the river this morning," his father says, as Taudo enters. The old man sits by the fire, weathered hands wrapped around a clay cup. "The women gossip about your absence." "Let them gossip," Taudo replies, hanging his bow on pegs by the door. "I needed quiet to think." "There is little time for thinking. Preparations have already begun." Taudo turns away, jaw tight. "It is done then. There is no changing the council's mind. It was decided before you were born," his father says, voice softening with rare compassion. "Your mother's brother saved my life in the war with the Navajo. I promised him our families would join. And so you sell your son. I honor my word, as you will honor yours." Silence fills the cabin as Taudo stares into the flames. He remembers Nahimana as a child, dark eyes serious as she collected herbs with her grandmother. Later, a gangly girl sent away to the white man's school. Now a woman returned, educated, and if rumors spoke true, resistant to tribal ways. "She does not want this either," Taudo finally says. His father rises, bones creaking. Want has little to do with duty. After his father leaves, Taudo sits alone, carving a piece of cedar wood. His thoughts drift to Kaya, the woman he once loved. Dead 5 winters now from the white man's coughing sickness. Would he have fought the council's decision for her? Perhaps, but there seems little point in fighting now. A knock interrupts his solitude. Little Wolf, his hunting partner, enters without waiting for permission. "There you are. Half the village thinks you ran away." His grin fades at Taudo's expression. "That bad, eh? Would you marry your cousin if ordered?" Little Wolf sits, helping himself to dried meat. "Depends. Is she pretty?" Taudo throws a stick at him. "This is not a joke." "No." Little Wolf grows serious. "But it is your reality now. Nahimana is educated, strong-willed. There are worse matches. A willing one would be better." "True." Little Wolf stretches his legs toward the fire. "Her father came looking for you earlier. They expect you for the blessing ceremony tomorrow." Taudo's hand finds the wolf tooth again. His grandfather's words echo from childhood. The wolf knows when to fight and when to endure. Wisdom is knowing the difference. Is this a time for endurance or rebellion? The weight of tribal expectation presses down like winter snow. Later, as evening shadows lengthen, Taudo walks to the edge of the bluff, overlooking the valley. Smoke rises from family fires in the village below. Children's laughter carries on the wind. This is his world, everything he has known and protected. A rider approaches along the path, a woman on a paint horse. Even at a distance he recognizes Nahimana's straight back and proud posture. She has not seen him yet. For a moment he considers slipping away into the forest. Instead he waits, curious despite himself. Their first conversation as betrothed couple awaits. Perhaps in her eyes he will find the answer to what this forced union might become. Prison or possibility. The wolf tooth feels warm against his skin as he watches her approach. Endurance or rebellion. Neither seems right. Perhaps there is a third path, one not yet visible in the gathering dusk. Nahimana's fingers trace the detailed illustration of the human heart, its chambers and vessels, labeled in English. 5 years at the missionary school had given her this knowledge the elders would consider dangerous or useless. Yet she kept the textbook hidden beneath her sleeping mat like a forbidden treasure. Nahimana, her mother's voice carried through their dwelling. The women are gathering for your preparation ceremony. Swiftly she slid the book into its hiding place. I am coming, mother. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows as women from the tribe assembled with baskets of cornmeal, herbs and dyes. Their eyes followed her, some pitying, others envious, all curious about the educated girl now bound to tradition. There she is, her aunt declared, looking more like a white teacher than a bride. Nahimana straightened her shoulders, but kept her expression neutral. The boarding school had taught her that too, how to wear a mask of compliance, while her mind remained her own. Her grandmother, Sitala, approached with a bowl of sacred clay. Come, child, we begin the purification. As the oldest woman mixed the clay with water, Nahimana knelt before her, allowing gentle hands to apply the mixture to her face and arms. The familiar scent of earth grounded her despite the storm of emotions within. Your thoughts are far away, Sitala murmured, too low for others to hear. They forced him to accept this marriage, just as they forced me, Nahimana whispered back. How can good come from such a beginning? The old woman's eyes, clouded with cataracts but sharp with wisdom, studied her face. Sometimes the path we fight is the very one we need. I had different plans, grandmother. I was saving money to attend the nursing school in Phoenix. Perhaps those plans are merely delayed, not destroyed. Sitala's weathered fingers smoothed the clay on Nahimana's forehead. Tado is a good man, not like others who would clip your wings completely. The preparation continued as women sang traditional songs, working sacred patterns into her hair with bone combs. Nahimana endured their ministrations, her mind drifting to the letter hidden with her textbook, the acceptance to nursing school she'd never shown her parents. Later, as twilight settled over the reservation, Nahimana escaped to the creek behind their home. Kneeling by the water, she scrubbed the clay from her skin, watching it dissolve into the current like her dreams. You always did prefer water to company, came a voice from the brush. Nahimana turned to find her cousin Kimi approaching, carrying a bundle of dried herbs. The women talk of nothing but your wedding, Kimi said, sitting beside her. They say it will bring great fortune to both families. They can have the fortune. I want my freedom. Kimi's eyes widened. You cannot speak this way. The elders have not seen what I have seen, Nahimana interrupted. Children dying from simple infections, women lost in childbirth that could have been saved with proper care. And you believe you could prevent such things with the white man's medicine, with both medicines together, our herbs and their tools, knowledge from both worlds. Nahimana picked up a smooth stone, turning it in her palm. But now I am to be a wife instead. Kimi was quiet for a moment. Tado is respected. He may allow you more freedom than most husbands. The thought provided little comfort. Permission is still a cage, even if the bars are wide. As darkness fell, Nahimana made her way toward the bluff path. She needed space, air, perspective before tomorrow's ceremony. Mounting her paint horse, she rode away from the village, toward the overlook that provided views across the entire valley. Her heart jolted when she spotted a figure already there, the unmistakable silhouette of Tado against the darkening sky. It was too late to turn back. He had seen her. Their first moment alone as a betrothed couple was upon her. Nahimana straightened her spine as she approached. Whatever cage awaited her, she would enter it with dignity and tact. Perhaps, she thought as she noted his equally hesitant posture, he felt as trapped as she did. In that shared burden, might there be some small understanding? Smoke from the council fire rose straight into the evening sky, a good omen according to the elders. Chief Nkosi sat with stillness that belied his 70 winters, flanked by 7 council members in ceremonial dress. The fire's glow deepened the lines on their faces, shadows of decisions made across decades. "Bring them forward," Nkosi commanded, his voice carrying across the gathered tribe. Tado approached from the western edge, his father one step behind. From the east came Nahimana, with her parents. The symbolism was lost on no one, sun and moon coming together, opposites joining to create balance. Neither looked at the other as they took their places before the council. Elder Makia, oldest of the councilwomen, leaned forward. Unlike the others, her expression held something beyond stern approval, perhaps concern, perhaps curiosity. "For 7 generations," Chief Nkosi began, "the promise between these families has waited for fulfillment. Today we honor that promise and strengthen our people's bloodline." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathering. Children were quickly shushed. "Tado, son of Hakan, hunter and warrior of our people," the chief continued, "do you accept this sacred duty to your tribe?" A heartbeat of hesitation before Tado answered, "I accept." "Nahimana, daughter of Kichi, healer and woman of knowledge, do you accept this sacred duty to your people?" Her voice came softer but no less firm. "I accept." The formal words satisfied tradition, though anyone watching closely might have noted both sets of eyes focused on the ground, not on each other or their future. Elder Ahati, keeper of lineage records, stepped forward with a decorated hide scroll. "The joining of cousins keeps our bloodline strong, our traditions pure. The ancestors smile upon such unions." From her place among the council, Elder Makia spoke unexpectedly. The ancestors also valued strong hearts and willing spirits in marriage. A tense silence followed her words. Makia rarely spoke at council, making her intervention all the more noticeable. Chief Nkosi frowned. "The willingness is demonstrated in their acceptance." "Acceptance of duty is not the same as willingness of heart," Makia replied, her aged voice gentle but persistent. Nahimana's father stepped forward. "My daughter understands her responsibility. She has learned the white man's medicine, but she remains Apache in her soul. And my son," Hakan added, "has always honored tribal ways. This marriage fulfills an old promise between brothers." The explanation satisfied most present, but Makia's gaze remained thoughtful as she studied both young people. Finally she nodded and retreated into silence. Chief Nkosi continued the ceremony, outlining expectations for the couple. A dwelling would be prepared at the village edge, close to the healing grounds where Nahimana would work under her grandmother's guidance. Tado would continue his hunting, but would now provide first for his wife and future children before sharing with the wider tribe. As the formalities concluded, members of the tribe approached with gifts and advice. Women surrounded Nahimana with knowing smiles and whispered suggestions for the wedding night. Men clapped Tado's shoulder with congratulations tinged with envy for his bride's beauty. Through it all, the betrothed pair maintained careful distance, their discomfort visible only in the stiffness of their postures and the fixed quality of their polite smiles. 3 days, announced Chief Nkosi finally. 3 days for preparation, and then the wedding ceremony at the full moon. As the gathering dispersed, Elder Makia approached Nahimana, separating her briefly from the cluster of women. "Child," she said, her voice for Nahimana alone, "remember that duty performed without spirit is like medicine without prayer. It may work, but without deeper healing." Before Nahimana could respond, the old woman pressed something into her hand, a small carved stone bear, warm from being held close. Strength, Makia whispered, comes in many forms. Across the clearing, Tado watched the exchange with curiosity. When his eyes met Nahimana's over the dispersing crowd, something passed between them. Not affection, not yet understanding, but perhaps a first flicker of recognition. Two unwilling pieces moved by hands not their own, but pieces that might yet decide their own game. Sunrise painted the eastern hills copper as Tado emerged from the sweat lodge. Steam rose from his shoulders in the cool morning air. 2 days remained before the wedding, and tradition demanded purification of body and spirit. Little Wolf handed him a cloth. Clean enough for marriage now. Clean, Tado replied, but no more ready. They walked toward the river, morning silence broken only by distant birdsong. 3 other warriors joined them, all friends since boyhood. So, Bearskin said, splashing water on his face, you'll have an educated wife. She'll speak fancy English words while you skin rabbits. The others laughed, but Tado merely shrugged. Better an educated wife than a foolish one. They say she challenged the mission teacher, offered Grey Fox. Argued that Apache medicine worked better than their pills. This caught Tado's interest. Did she win the argument? She mixed the medicines together and healed the teacher's fever. Both sides claimed victory. The men laughed again, but Tado found himself considering this new information. A woman willing to challenge authority yet practical enough to use all available tools, perhaps more interesting than he'd assumed. Enough talk, he said finally. The elk won't wait for wedding gossip. As the men prepared for hunting, Tado's thoughts remained divided between the deer trail and the woman he would soon call wife. Across the village, Nahimana sat cross-legged on a woven mat while her mother and aunts sorted wedding preparations around her. Her hair, freshly washed with yucca root, hung in a damp curtain down her back. You must wear the ceremonial dress, her mother insisted, holding up an elaborately beaded garment. It has been worn by brides in our family for 4 generations. Nahimana touched the intricate beadwork. It's beautiful, mother. You sound surprised, her mother said, frowning. I can appreciate beauty and still question tradition. Her aunt Helona clicked her tongue disapprovingly. This questioning is what comes from too much school learning. The school taught me medicine, not rebellion, Nahimana countered, though perhaps one leads to the other. The women exchanged glances. Nahimana's grandmother entered carrying herbs for the wedding sashes, ending the brewing argument with her presence. Come, Sitala said. I will show you how to prepare your husband's dwelling. Grateful for the interruption, Nahimana followed her grandmother outside. I have no wisdom about being a wife, Nahimana admitted, as they walked. The school taught anatomy, not marriage. Sitala's laugh was soft. Perhaps they are not so different. Both require understanding of another's true nature. They approached a small dwelling at the village edge. Her future home with Tado. Workers were completing the roof with fresh pine boughs. It seems very final, Nahimana whispered. A dwelling is just walls and roof. Her grandmother replied. What happens within creates the true home. Inside, women were preparing the space, hanging woven curtains and arranging cooking vessels. They nodded respectfully to Sitala, while eyeing Nahimana with curious glances. Where will he sleep? Nahimana asked when they were momentarily alone. Sitala's weathered face revealed nothing. That is for you and your husband to decide. Later, as afternoon shadows lengthened, Nahimana sought solitude by the small creek behind the new dwelling. She unwrapped her precious medical textbook, fingering the pages that described the healing properties of willow bark. Knowledge her people had possessed for generations, written in the white man's words as if newly discovered. Is that your school learning? She startled, nearly dropping the book. Tado stood nearby, carrying freshly killed rabbits for the evening meal. Nahimana closed the book carefully. Yes, anatomy and medicine. He nodded, making no move to come closer. Your grandmother says you combine our ways with theirs. The best of both, she confirmed, studying his face for judgment and finding none. The dwelling is nearly finished, he said after a moment. They say we must inspect it together before sundown. It was the longest conversation they'd had since childhood. Nehemana rose, tucking the book into her dress. I've been thinking, Tado said as they walked side by side, a careful distance between them. This arrangement, yes, perhaps we could make our own terms within it. The suggestion hung between them, unexpected and intriguing. Nehemana glanced at his profile, noting the tension in his jaw and the careful way he avoided meeting her eyes. What terms did you have in mind? She asked. As they reached the doorway of their future home, Tado finally looked directly at her. Terms that might allow us both some freedom, even within these walls. The wedding day arrived with a sky of perfect turquoise. Women had been working since before dawn, preparing food and decorating the ceremonial grounds. The entire tribe gathered, even those from distant camps returning for the significant union. Inside her mother's dwelling, Nehemana sat motionless as 4 women adorned her. The ceremonial dress felt heavier than she remembered, weighted with beadwork and expectations. Her mother fastened a necklace of polished stones around her throat. These stones have been worn by every bride in our family, she said, voice thick with emotion. Now they will bring blessing to your marriage. Nehemana touched the cool stones. Did they bring happiness to yours? Her mother's hands paused. They brought what was needed: strength, children, respect. Not love. Love comes in many forms, her mother replied carefully. Sometimes it grows from duty well performed. Outside, drums began their slow, steady rhythm. Nehemana closed her eyes, feeling each beat echo in her chest, like approaching footsteps of an unavoidable fate. Elder Makia entered, her presence silencing the chattering women. It is time. Across the village, Tado stood tall as his father painted traditional symbols on his bare chest: strength, honor, fertility. The black paint felt cool against his skin, but his thoughts burned with restless energy. Stand still, his father commanded. These symbols connect you to all Apache warriors who became husbands before you. Tado forced himself to stillness. Did you feel trapped on your wedding day? His father's hand paused mid-stroke. I felt responsible. There is honor in responsibility. And now, after 30 years with mother, a rare smile crossed his father's weathered face. Now I cannot imagine a different path. The admission surprised them both. When the preparation was complete, Tado's male relatives accompanied him to the ceremonial grounds. The tribe parted as he approached, creating a path to the blanket where Chief Nkosi waited. The women's side remained empty, awaiting the bride. The drums changed rhythm, announcing Nehemana's approach. Tado turned, seeing her for the first time in ceremonial dress. She walked with dignity, eyes forward, surrounded by female relatives. Her expression revealed nothing, but he noted the tension in her shoulders, mirroring his own. They stood facing each other on a deerskin blanket, close enough to touch, but separated by more than physical space. Chief Nkosi raised his hands for silence. Since the beginning of our people, he intoned, we have joined man and woman to strengthen our tribe. Today we witness the fulfillment of a promise between brothers, binding their children and ensuring the continuation of our strongest bloodlines. The ceremony proceeded with ancient precision. They exchanged traditional foods, Tado offering venison symbolizing his promise to provide, Nehemana offering cornbread representing nurturing and home. Their hands brushed during the exchange, the first physical contact between them, brief and electric. Elder Makia presented a clay vessel of clear water, as this water has no beginning or end, flowing in the eternal circle of life, so shall your union be unbroken. They each drank from the vessel, completing the ritual binding. The tribe erupted in celebration around them, but between the newly wedded couple stood a silence thick with unspoken thoughts. Hours later, after feasting and dancing they had endured with practiced smiles, they were escorted to their dwelling. According to tradition, they would remain inside for 4 days, emerging as a true married couple. The procession of relatives and friends left them at the threshold, with knowing smiles and suggestive jokes. The door closed, and suddenly they were alone, the small space filled with awkward silence. Nahimana stood by the central fire pit, still in her ceremonial dress. Tado remained near the door, uncertain. "So," he said finally, "we are married." "By their definition," she replied, her voice calm despite the turmoil evident in her eyes. Tado moved to the fire, adding small sticks to the embers. "You mentioned freedom during our talk yesterday. I've been thinking about what you said. And we are bound by tribal law, but perhaps, within these walls, we make our own rules." Nahimana studied him carefully. "What rules would you propose?" Tado gestured to the sleeping area, where a single large pallet had been prepared. "I can make a separate sleeping place. We need not fulfill all expectations immediately." Relief crossed her face, quickly replaced by weariness. "The tribe expects children. Eventually, perhaps. But not tonight. Not until—" he struggled to find the right words. "Not until we choose it," she finished for him. "Not until it would be more than duty." He nodded, surprised by her directness, and equally surprised by his own relief. "A marriage of form, then, while we determine what else it might become." "If anything," she added cautiously. "If anything," he agreed. For the first time since the arrangement was announced, something eased between them. Not quite trust, but the first fragile strands of understanding. The 4 days of traditional seclusion passed with surprising ease. They established rhythms and boundaries, carefully navigating the small space they now shared. Tado built a second sleeping pallet on the opposite side of the dwelling and constructed a woven screen between them. Privacy within their forced intimacy. On the 5th morning they emerged together as custom dictated. The tribe welcomed them with a feast, eyes watching for signs of consummation. Nahimana wore her hair in the married woman's style, while Tado stood protective beside her, his hand occasionally touching her elbow in a gesture that appeared intimate to observers, but was merely courteous guidance. "They seem well matched after all," whispered the women as they watched the couple. "His father's promise was wise," agreed the men, nodding with approval. Only Elder Makia's sharp eyes noted the careful distance they maintained even when standing close. When the celebration ended, she approached them with a basket of herbs. "For your home," she said, pressing it into Nahimana's hands. Leaning closer, she added softly, "Some seeds need time before they're ready to sprout." 2 weeks settled into routine. Mornings found Tado departing before dawn for hunting, while Nahimana gathered herbs or worked alongside her grandmother in the healing lodge. Evenings brought them together over shared meals, conversation gradually becoming less strained. "The council asks when you'll join the hunting party to the northern valley." Nahimana mentioned one evening, stirring a pot of stew. "Little Wolf said they delayed the trip awaiting your participation." Tado looked up from the arrowheads he was crafting. "They expect me to behave as other new husbands, reluctant to leave my wife's side." A small smile touched her lips. "Perhaps you should go. People talk about how little time you spend in the village now." "Let them talk," he replied, but his expression grew thoughtful. "Though it might ease suspicions if I appeared more traditionally satisfied." The implication hung between them, neither embarrassed nor eager to address it directly. "I could gather medicinal plants in the northern foothills while you hunt," she suggested practically. "We could return together." He nodded slowly. A reasonable compromise. Their arrangement continued, evolving with each passing day. In public they performed the expected roles, the attentive husband, the dutiful wife. In private, they maintained their separate spaces while building an unexpected friendship. 1 month after their wedding, the first real test came. Nehemana's mother visited unexpectedly, bringing additional household items. "The blanket your grandmother wove for your first child," she said, presenting a small, intricately patterned textile. Her eyes searched the dwelling, noting the divided sleeping area with obvious disapproval. After she left, Nehemana held the baby blanket, her expression troubled. "They expect children," she said. That evening as Tado returned from hunting, he set down his bow, understanding immediately. How long before questions become suspicions? A year, perhaps less. She folded the blanket carefully. "My mother already suspects something is wrong." Tado sat across from her, the fire between them. "Is there something wrong? We've made the best of an unwanted situation by creating a false marriage." Nehemana's voice held no accusation, merely statement of fact. "Not false," he countered. "Simply unconventional." They fell silent, each lost in thought. The compromise that had made their arrangement bearable now threatened to unravel under tribal expectations. "I had a letter," Nehemana said finally, "before our marriage. Acceptance to a nursing program in Phoenix." Tado studied her face in the firelight. "You wish to go?" "I did." She met his gaze steadily. "I still do." Instead of the resistance she expected, he merely nodded. "When would this program begin?" 3 months from now, but it's impossible. A married woman cannot simply leave, unless her husband accompanies her. The words surprised them both. Nehemana's eyes widened. "You would consider leaving the reservation?" "I've traded with towns before. Their world is not entirely unknown to me." He poked the fire, sending sparks upward, "And perhaps distance would provide freedom for us both. The tribe would never approve. The tribe need not know our true arrangement." He leaned forward. "If we presented it as a husband supporting his wife's healing gifts, bringing new medicine back to benefit the people." For the first time since their marriage, Nehemana looked at Tado with something approaching hope. "You would do this?" "Our agreement was for freedom within constraints," he said simply. "Perhaps we must widen the constraints." That night, as they retired to their separate pallets on opposite sides of the woven screen, something had shifted between them. Not romance, but partnership in a shared conspiracy. Their marriage of convenience was becoming an alliance. Dawn mist clung to the valley as Tado led Nehemana along a narrow deer trail. 2 weeks had passed since their conversation about Phoenix, and though no firm decision had been made, something had shifted between them. Today marked their first journey together beyond the village boundaries, ostensibly to gather rare medicinal plants that grew in the high meadows, but also to speak freely away from watchful eyes. "The juniper bark you wanted is ahead," Tado said, pointing to a grove of twisted trees, "and there's a stream with watercress beyond." Nehemana adjusted her gathering basket. "You know plant locations well for a hunter. I notice what animals eat when sick," he replied with a shrug. "My grandfather taught me that medicine shows itself through the creatures it heals." She glanced at him with new interest. "My grandmother says the same." They worked in companionable silence, Nehemana harvesting juniper bark, while Tado scouted the perimeter. When she finished, he motioned her toward the stream, where watercress grew in abundance. "Here," he said, offering his hunting knife, handle first. "The stems are tough." She accepted the knife, their fingers brushing. Unlike their ceremonial food exchange, this contact felt natural, unforced. "Thank you." As she gathered watercress, Tado built a small fire and prepared a rabbit he'd caught earlier. The domestic scene might have appeared ordinary to any observer, husband and wife working together in the wilderness. Yet for them, it marked unfamiliar territory. They shared the simple meal, conversation gradually turning to their Phoenix plans. "The nursing program lasts 2 years." Nehemana explained, warming her hands around a cup of pine needle tea. "I would learn their medicine while sharing our traditional remedy." "And what would I do in their world?" Tado asked, not resentfully but with genuine curiosity. "There are Apache men who work as guides, or in construction." She hesitated. Or you could return here, visit occasionally to maintain appearances. He considered this separate lives with a shared story. We already live separate lives under one roof, she reminded him. A half smile crossed his face. True enough. After eating, they continued deeper into the foothill. Nahamana spotted a cluster of wild tobacco plants, explaining their use for ceremonial purposes and respiratory ailments. Tado listened with unexpected interest, asking questions about preparation methods. You could have been a healer, she observed, and you move through the forest with a hunter's awareness, he countered, nodding toward how she instinctively stepped around dry twigs that might snap underfoot. The compliment pleased her more than expected. My father taught me before deciding daughters should learn women's medicine instead. Unfortunate, Tado remarked. Skills shouldn't be limited by whether one is born male or female. Nahamana stopped short, studying him with surprise. That's not a common view among our men. Perhaps that's why I've never felt entirely at ease among them, he admitted. The conversation opened doors between them, revealing complexities neither had anticipated in the other. As afternoon shadows lengthened, they discovered shared frustrations with tribal constraints and similar dreams of a world where tradition and progress might coexist. They reached a high meadow carpeted with wild flowers, a breathtaking view of the valley below. Without discussion, both sat on a sun-warmed boulder, shoulders nearly touching. I've been thinking, Tado said after a comfortable silence. Phoenix needn't be just your opportunity. Perhaps there are things I could learn there as well. What things? Their language, their laws. His expression grew determined. Knowledge we could use to protect our land and rights. The government men who visit speak of boundaries and treaties, words on paper that somehow hold more power than generations of our people living on this land. Nahamana considered his words. So we would both study, me their medicine, you their laws, and return stronger, he finished. Not changed, but armed with understanding. The idea hung between them, full of possibility. For the first time, their unwanted marriage offered something neither could achieve alone, a partnership with purpose. As they gathered their belongings to return home, a sudden mountain shower forced them to seek shelter beneath an overhanging rock face. The close quarters brought them physically nearer than they'd been since their wedding. Raindrops played a gentle rhythm on leaves outside their shelter. When I was at the mission school, Nehemana said softly, I thought I'd never return to tribal ways. Then when forced home for this marriage, I thought I'd never leave again. Now, she looked at him, really looked at him perhaps for the first time. Now I'm not certain of anything, except that we decide together, Tado replied, his voice equally quiet. Whatever comes next. Something unspoken passed between them in that moment. Not love, not yet, but the thiest, fragile tendrils of genuine trust. The tribal council gathering had been called with unusual urgency. Men and women crowded the meeting area, voices hushed with concern. Chief Nkosi's face was grave as he held up a paper covered in official stamps and signatures. The government men came today, he announced. They speak of a new road through our hunting grounds. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Tado sat with the warriors, listening intently as Nkosi continued. They say the paper gives them rights to cut through the eastern valley, the chief explained. They will begin in one moon cycle. Elder Ahati rose, face flushed with anger. They cannot take what was given to us by treaty 20 summers ago. They bring new papers that they claim change the old agreement. Nkosi replied wearily. From her place among the women, Nahimana watched the men debate. Her education at the mission school had taught her how easily white authorities dismissed and rewrote agreements with native peoples. The Eastern Valley contained many of the medicinal plants her grandmother depended upon. Losing it would impact the tribe's health as well as their hunting. When the council invited warriors to speak, Tadu stood. In the 2 months since their marriage, his status had risen, a husband and provider whose opinion carried weight. These government papers, he said, his deep voice carrying across the gathering, did any among us read what they contained? Silence answered him. Even Nkosi, educated at a government school decades earlier, shook his head. Then we fight blind, Tadu continued. We need to understand their words to challenge them properly. An older warrior scoffed. Words on paper mean nothing against our spears and rifles, and how many of our people would die in such a fight? Tadu countered. The soldiers have more guns, more men. We must find another way. The debate continued, growing heated. Nahimana listened, something forming in her mind. Finally, breaking with tradition, she stood. Women rarely spoke in council, and the abrupt silence that followed her action carried disapproval. Nahimana met Tadu's eyes across the circle, finding encouragement there. At the mission school, she began carefully. I learned about government papers and land rights. If the new road damages our water or destroys important plants, there are laws the white men themselves must follow. Chief Nkosi frowned. Sika plainly, daughter of Kichi. Their own laws may protect us, she explained, but we must know how to use them. The silence that followed felt weighted with both skepticism and consideration. Finally, Elder Makia spoke from her place among the council. The young wife speaks wisdom, the old woman said. Fighting with weapons will bring only death. Fighting with knowledge may bring victory. Gradually, the council reached consensus. They needed to understand the government's plans before deciding how to respond. But the question remained. Who could interpret the legal language and navigate the white man's world of documents and regulations? As the gathering dispersed, Tadu found Nahimana waiting outside their dwelling, her expression thoughtful. You spoke well, he said quietly. Brave to break tradition. They would not have listened without your support, she replied. The night air carried a chill as they entered their home. The fire needed tending, and they moved around each other with the comfortable familiarity of 2 months' cohabitation. The woven screen remained between their sleeping areas, but its significance had diminished as their friendship had grown. I've been thinking, Nahimana said as they sat by the fire, about the nursing program in Phoenix. Tadu looked up. Wait, there's a legal college in the same city, she continued. Not for Indians, officially, but there are ways. Her voice trailed off. You once spoke of learning their laws to protect our land. Understanding dawned on his face. You think we should go now because of the road threat. We need knowledge to fight this battle, she said simply. I could study medicine as planned, while you learn to read their laws and treaties, he finished. Use their weapons against them. The idea hung between them, suddenly more urgent than their original plan, transformed from personal escape to tribal necessity. The council would not easily approve, Tadu said, though his tone suggested he was already considering how to overcome this obstacle. What if it wasn't presented as our idea? Nahimana leaned forward. What if Elder Makia suggested sending representatives to learn the white man's ways? She already supported my speaking. Tadu nodded slowly, the plan taking shape between them, a mission for the tribe rather than personal choice. They could hardly select more appropriate representatives than a healer and a warrior, she added, with the hint of a smile. For a moment, they sat in silence, the enormity of what they were considering settling over them. This was no longer about creating space within an unwanted marriage, but committing to a shared purpose that would take them far from everything familiar. We would need to truly rely on each other there, Tadu said finally. 2 Apache in the white man's world. Yes, Nahimana agreed softly. No more separate lives under one roof. A real partnership. Something shifted in Tadu's expression, a warmth that hadn't been there before. I find I don't object to that as I once might have. Nahimana looked away, suddenly conscious of the heat rising to her cheeks. Nor do I. Elder Makia had embraced their plan with surprising enthusiasm. 3 days after the council meeting, she had formally proposed sending Tadu and Nahimana to Phoenix as tribal representatives, him to learn the white man's laws, her to study their medicine. After hours of debate, the council approved, though not without resistance from the more traditional members. You leave in 2 weeks, Chief Nkosi announced, return with knowledge to protect our land and people. Preparations consumed them. Nahimana gathered her medical supplies and the acceptance letter she'd hidden for months. Tado arranged for Little Wolf to assume his hunting responsibilities. Together, they weatherproofed their dwelling for the coming abs. It was during this work that Tado discovered the hidden compartment beneath the floor. A small storage space apparently created by the dwelling's previous occupant, his great-uncle who had passed away years earlier. "Look at this," he called to Nahimana, lifting out a bundle wrapped in faded cloth. She knelt beside him as he unwrapped a weathered leather journal, its pages yellowed and brittle with age. Inside, careful handwriting filled page after page, dated nearly 40 years earlier. "It's in English," Nahimana said with surprise, running her finger along the faded ink. "Your great-uncle wrote in English?" He worked as a translator for the army before returning to tribal ways. Tado explained, equally surprised by the discovery. "I never knew he kept journals." That evening, by firelight, they sat shoulder to shoulder examining the journal. Nahimana translated passages the mission school education had made accessible to her. "He writes about his time at Fort Bowie," she said, turning pages carefully. "About tensions between soldiers and Apache. About—" She paused, frowning. "About your grandfather and mine." Tado leaned closer. "What does it say?" "It's complicated. He uses names I don't recognize." She continued reading silently, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "Tado, I think this says your grandfather wasn't your father's true father." "What?" "According to this, your grandmother was captured during a raid when already with child by a warrior who died in battle. Your grandfather married her knowing the child, your father wasn't his by blood." Tado took the journal, staring at the words he couldn't decipher. "Are you certain? The journal is clear. Your grandmother was carrying another man's child when she came to your grandfather's home." Nahimana's voice had grown hushed. "And that warrior who died was my grandfather's brother." The implication hung between them in the firelit quiet. "If this is true," Tado began. "Then we are not blood cousins," Nahimana finished. "Your father and my father would not share blood at all." They sat in stunned silence. The journal opened between them like a door to an alternate reality. The marriage they had been forced into under the premise of strengthening family bloodlines was built on a secret history neither family had acknowledged. "We must confirm this," Tado said finally, "before we draw conclusions." The next morning found them at his father's dwelling. Hakan listened to their carefully worded questions with growing discomfort, his weathered face revealing the truth before he spoke. "Who told you this?" he demanded. Tado produced the journal. "Great-uncle Denali's writings." Hakan's shoulders slumped. "It was never meant to be known outside the elders. When my mother came to the village, she was carrying a child, Meh. Her first husband, Apache, had been killed 3 moons earlier. Why maintain the fiction of shared blood between our families?" Nahimana asked. "Why force us to marry as cousins when we are not related by blood? The promise between brothers was real." Hakan insisted. "When Denali saved my adoptive father's life, they swore their descendants would join. It was about honor, not blood. Yet you told the council our marriage was to strengthen family bloodlines," Tado countered, an edge entering his voice. His father wouldn't meet his eyes. "The council values blood connection. They might not have honored a promise based merely on friendship, especially after so many generations." The revelation left them reeling. Walking back to their dwelling, they maintained a careful distance, the implications too enormous to address in the open. Once inside, Nahimana spoke first. "This changes nothing about our plans for Phoenix, but it changes everything about our arrangement," Tado replied carefully. The understanding between them, separate spaces, marriage in name only, had been predicated on their belief that they were blood relatives. That foundation had crumbled. "I suppose it does," she acknowledged, her voice steady despite the flush rising in her cheeks. Tado moved to the fire. needing occupation for his suddenly restless hands. We are still bound by tribal law and expectations, yes, but not by the concern that governed our earlier agreement. Nahimana smoothed her skirt, eyes downcast. No. A new tension filled the space between them, not the awkward constraint of their early days together, but something electric and unfamiliar. For 3 months they had built a friendship and partnership, while carefully maintaining physical boundaries. Now those boundaries seemed arbitrary, based on a falsehood neither had questioned. "We leave for Phoenix in 11 days, Tado said finally. "Perhaps we should consider this new even carefully before making any changes to our arrangement." Nahimana nodded, relief and something like disappointment mingling in her expression. A wise approach. That night, the woven screen between their sleeping areas remained in place, but both lay awake far longer than usual, the certainties that had defined their relationship dissolving into possibilities neither had anticipated. The fever that struck Elder Makia came suddenly and burned fiercely. By nightfall, the old woman lay delirious on her sleeping mat, her breathing labored. Sitila sent word throughout the village, and soon Nahimana knelt beside her grandmother at the elder's bedside. "The fever spirit has her in its grip," Sitila murmured, wringing out a cloth in cool water. Nahimana placed her palm on Makia's forehead, feeling heat radiating from the papery skin. "How long has she been like this?" "Since midday. It worsens with each hour." The small dwelling filled with concerned tribal members. Chief Nokosi himself came to stand solemnly in the doorway. Makia was the oldest living elder, a repository of tribal knowledge and wisdom. Her loss would leave a void impossible to fill. Nahimana felt the weight of eyes upon her, expectant, hopeful, skeptical. Since her council speech, opinions about her had polarized. Some viewed her education as valuable, others saw it as corruption of tribal ways. "I need space to work," she said firmly, surprising herself with her authority. More surprising was how quickly people obeyed, backing away to give her room. From her medicine pouch, she extracted dried willow bark, a traditional fever remedy, and something else, white tablets from the mission school infirmary. "What are those?" her mother asked sharply. "Medicine for reducing fever," Nahimana replied, her voice steady. "I will use both our remedies and theirs." A murmur of disapproval rippled through the onlookers. Elder Ahata stepped forward. "Our ways have served us for generations. The white man's pills are not needed." "With respect, Elder," Nahimana countered. "I have seen this fever before at the school. It took 3 children before the doctor found that combining treatments worked most effectively." Silence fell. Tauda, who had been standing quietly by the door, moved to her side. "My wife studied healing at the mission school to bring knowledge back to our people," he said, his deep voice carrying weight. "Let her use all she has learned." Their eyes met briefly, silent communication of support and gratitude. Something had shifted between them in the week since discovering they weren't related by blood. Nothing had been said directly, no changes made to their living arrangements, yet a new awareness hummed between them like an unplucked bowstring. With the tribe watching, Nahimana prepared a willow bark tea, dissolving the white medicine within it. As she worked, she sang the traditional healing songs her grandmother had taught her. The combination seemed to ease tensions, her modern knowledge wrapped in familiar ritual. Through the night, she tended Makia, applying cool cloths, administering medicine, monitoring the elder's pulse and breathing. Tado remained, bringing fresh water and herbs as needed, his presence steady and supportive. By dawn, the fever broke. Makia's eyes opened, clear and aware. "You sing like your grandmother," she whispered to Nahimana. "But your hands work differently." Word spread quickly. By midday, 3 more villagers with lesser symptoms came seeking treatment. Nahimana worked tirelessly, combining traditional remedies with modern technique. Tado created a shaded area outside their dwelling where patients could wait, bringing them water and speaking confident words about his wife's healing abilities. When evening came, Nahimana finally returned home. Exhaustion, etched in every line of her body. Tado had prepared a simple meal, an unexpected reversal of their usual roles. "You've changed how they see you," he said as she sank down by the fire. "How they see us both." She nodded, too tired for words, accepting the bowl he offered. "Tomorrow we leave for Phoenix," he continued. "We go with more support than we might have had before." Elder Makia's illness was fortunate timing, she murmured, then caught herself. "That sounds terrible." "I understand your meaning," Tado assured her. "The tribe sees value in your knowledge now. In our journey." They ate in comfortable silence, the events of the day settling between them. When Nahimana finished, she moved to rise, but exhaustion made her stumble. Tado caught her arm, steadying her. The contact lingered, his hand warm against her skin. "Thank you," she said softly, "not pulling away, for your support today." "We are partners in this," he replied, his voice lower than usual. In all of this, their eyes met, and the moment stretched between them, taut with possibility. Nahimana felt her heart beat quicker. It would be so easy to lean closer, to cross the invisible boundary they'd maintained these months. A call from outside broke the moment. Little Wolf, bringing news of their travel arrangements. Tado released her arm and moved to the door, leaving Nahimana with the lingering warmth of his touch and the unsettling realization that her feelings for her husband had transformed into something she hadn't anticipated. Later, preparing for sleep, she watched Tado through the woven screen as he checked their travel packs one final time. His movements were efficient, purposeful, the firelight casting his features in sharp relief. When had the arrangement of his face become so familiar, so necessary to her peace of mind? "Are you ready for tomorrow?" he asked, sensing her gaze. "Yes," she answered simply, meaning far more than just their journey. Phoenix sprawled before them, a tangle of buildings and roads unlike anything Nahimana had seen during her years at the mission school. 3 weeks into their stay, the city's constant noise and movement still unsettled Tado, though he had adapted with surprising resilience. They had secured modest accommodations near the nursing school, a small apartment with actual walls instead of the woven screen they'd grown accustomed to. The enforced proximity had created a new awareness between them, charged with unspoken possibilities yet tempered by the seriousness of their mission. "The government men are coming tomorrow," Tado said, spreading papers across their table. "I received word from Little Wolf." Nahimana set down her medical textbook. In the lamplight, her face showed the strain of long hours spent in study. "So soon? We've barely begun our work here." "They don't wait for our convenience," he replied grimly. "The council asks if we've learned anything useful." She moved to his side, examining the legal documents he'd been studying. The law college had reluctantly allowed him to attend certain classes as an observer, though his official enrollment had been denied. Professor Wilkins explained how environmental protection laws might help us, Tado continued, indicating passages he'd marked. "If the road construction threatens water sources or endangered plants, we have grounds for objection. We would need to document what's in the path," Nahimana mused. "Create evidence they can't dismiss." A knock interrupted their discussion. Their landlady, Mrs. Carpenter, stood at the door with a telegram. "For Mr. Tado," she said, eyeing them curiously as always. They had presented themselves as a married couple studying in the city, an arrangement unusual enough to generate constant interest. Tado read the message with a deepening frown. "The surveyors begin work tomorrow. Chief Nokosi asks that we return immediately." Nahimana felt her heart sink. "But we've only just started our studies. The situation grows urgent." He met her eyes. "We must go." The journey back to the reservation took 2 days by train and horseback. They traveled in silence, each absorbed in thoughts of what awaited and what they were leaving behind. The brief taste of city life, despite its strangeness, had offered a freedom neither had experienced within tribal boundaries. As they crested the final ridge, the village came into view below. Smoke rose from cooking fires, children played between dwellings, life continued as it had for generations. Yet something had changed, not in the village, but in 3 weeks away had shifted their perspective, making them simultaneously more appreciative of their home and more aware of its limitations. Little Wolf met them at the village edge. The surveyors arrived yesterday, he reported. They camped by the eastern stream. Chief Nkosi called a council meeting immediately. The elders listened intently as Tado explained what he had learned about legal challenges to the road project. We need proof that the construction would damage important tribal resources, he explained. Sacred sites, medicinal plants, water sources. Elder Makia, fully recovered from her illness, nodded approvingly. Nahimana can identify the healing plants that would be lost. And I will document the hunting grounds and water sources, Tado added. By dawn, they were at work. Nahimana catalogued medicinal plants along the proposed route while Tado measured distances from water sources to the planned construction. They worked methodically, marking locations on the surveyor's map they had obtained from the government camp. Look at this, Nahimana called, pointing to a cluster of rare yellow root plants. These grow nowhere else on our lands. The school taught me about endangered species protection. This plant might qualify. Tado made careful no-chow-jams on their map. They continued through the day, building their case against the road. As afternoon shadows lengthened, they found themselves at the sacred prayer rocks, ancient formations where generations had sought spiritual guidance. The road would cut directly through this site, Tado observed grimly. Do their laws protect sacred places? Some religious freedom statutes might. Nahimana replied, recalling discussions from Phoenix. We should document the spiritual significance. They worked until sunset, returning to the village with their annotated map. The council received their work with solemn approval. Tomorrow, Chief Nkosi decided, we will invite the government men to council. Tado will present our objection. Later in their dwelling, they reviewed their findings. The familiar space felt different after their time away. Smaller perhaps, but also more truly theirs. You spoke well at council, Nahimana said, sorting her plant specimens. They respect what you've learned. And you, he replied, your knowledge of both worlds gives strength to our position. Their eyes met across the fire, a moment of shared purpose and pride. Something had solidified between them during their journey, a partnership deeper than their original arrangement. I've been thinking, Tado said carefully, about returning to Phoenix. After this matter is resolved, Nahimana looked up, hope flickering in her expression, to continue our studies. Yes. He moved closer, his voice low, but perhaps with a different understanding between us. The implication hung in the air between them. Since learning they weren't related by blood, they had maintained their separate spaces out of habit and uncertainty. Now the possibility of something more hovered unspoken. Before Nahimana could respond, a shout from outside broke the moment. Little Wolf's voice called urgently for Tado. The government men, he reported when they emerged. They've moved their equipment to the sacred rocks. They begin clearing land at first light. The confrontation could not be postponed after all. Their newly acquired knowledge would face its first test with the rising sun. Dawn mist still clung to the valley when they reached the sacred rocks. Government workers had already begun setting up equipment, stakes being driven into the ground, men with measuring tools marking trees for removal. A foreman in a dusty suit consulted papers while directing the operation. Tado and Nahimana watched from the tree line, along with Little Wolf and 3 other warriors. They've brought armed guards, Little Wolf whispered, nodding toward 2 men with rifles slung across their backs. Tado studied the scene. We need to delay them, not provoke violence. The initial confrontation went as expected. Chief Nkosi led a delegation to speak with the foreman, presenting their concerns with dignity. The man barely glanced at their annotated map. This road has been approved at the highest levels, he said dismissively. Your tribal concerns were addressed in meetings last year. We were never informed of such meetings, Nkosi insisted. The foreman shrugged. Not my department. I have orders and permits. He patted his briefcase. All signed and official. As the tense conversation continued, Tado drew Nahimana aside. They won't listen to words, he murmured. We need to see those permits, find weaknesses in their legal position. How? She asked. He won't show them to us. Tado's expression grew determined. Then we must find another way to see them. That evening they formulated their plan. The government men had established a temporary office in the trading post at White River, the nearest town to the reservation. According to Little Wool's reconnaissance, the documents were kept there overnight. It's dangerous, Nehemana argued as they prepared. If we're caught, the consequences of doing nothing are worse, Tado replied, checking the knife at his belt. Our people will lose sacred land forever. They left their horses at the edge of town, approaching on foot through the darkness. White River slept, only the saloon showing lights at this late hour. The trading post stood dark and silent at the far end of the main street. There, Tado whispered, pointing to a rear window. The lock looks simple. Nehemana kept watch as he worked the window open. Minutes later, they were inside, moving silently through moonlit shadows. The government documents were locked in a cabinet, but the mechanism yielded to Tado's hunting knife. Here, Nehemana whispered, finding a folder labeled Apache Reservation Road Project. She moved to the window where moonlight provided enough illumination to read. The documents confirmed their suspicions. The permits had been issued without proper tribal consultation. More damning, the environmental survey had been falsified, claiming no significant plant or animal habitats would be disturbed. We need copies, Tado said, examining the papers. No time, Nehemana replied, hearing voices outside. Someone's coming. They quickly replaced the folder, but as they prepared to leave, Tado noticed something on the desk, a brass stamp with the government seal used to mark official documents. This could prove useful, he murmured, slipping it into his pocket. They escaped through the window moments before the door opened. Pressed together in the shadows of an adjacent building, they held their breath as a night watchman passed. Nehemana was acutely aware of Tado's arm around her waist, holding her still, his breath warm against her hair. When the danger passed, they didn't immediately separate. Something in the shared risk had broken down the last of their hesitation. We should go, Tado finally whispered, his voice rougher than usual. They made it to their horses without incident, but as they mounted, a shout rang out. A figure emerged from the saloon, pointing in their direction. Ride, Tado commanded. They galloped into the darkness, the sound of pursuit fading behind them. Rain began to fall, a sudden summer storm that would wash away their tracks. Still, they pushed on, taking a longer route back to the reservation to ensure they weren't followed. The storm intensified. Lightning split the sky, and thunder rolled across the valley. When they reached the abandoned hunter's cabin halfway home, they were both soaked to the skin. We should wait out the worst, Tado said, leading the horses under the cabin's overhanging roof. Inside, the cabin was dusty but dry. Tado found old firewood and soon had a small flame crackling in the stone fireplace. Its light cast dancing shadows across the walls as they shed their wet outer garments. Nehemana sat before the fire, suddenly conscious of her thin dress clinging to her skin. Tado kept a careful distance, though his eyes betrayed him more than once. "Do you think anyone recognized us?" he asked, breaking the charged silence. "No," replied, feeding another stick to the flames, "but they'll know someone from the tribe was involved. What will we do with what we learned?" Tado produced the government seal from his pocket, turning it in the firelight. "Create our own official response. Challenge them with their own weapons." The risk they had taken, the knowledge they now shared, created an intimacy beyond physical proximity. When Tado finally sat beside her, their shoulders touching, it seemed the most natural thing in the world. "I was afraid back there," Nehemana admitted softly. "Not of being caught, but of failing our people." "We haven't failed," he assured her. "Whatever comes tomorrow, we face this challenge together." Her hand found his in the firelight. "Together," she echoed. The moment stretched between them, filled with possibility. Outside, Rain drummed on the roof, creating a world apart, where only they existed. When Tado's fingers brushed her cheek, turning her face toward his, Nahamana felt no desire to pull away. Their kiss, when it finally came, felt both inevitable and surprising, gentle at first, then deepening with months of unspoken longing. The woven screen that had separated them for so long existed now, only in memory, the last barrier between them dissolving like mist in morning sun. Morning sunlight streamed through the cabin's single window, waking Nahamana. She found herself curled against Tado's side, his arm draped protectively around her shoulders. For a moment she simply watched him sleep, studying the face that had become so essential to her world. Last night had transformed everything between them. The kiss by firelight had led to whispered confessions, to tentative touches growing bolder, to the discovery that their bodies fit together as perfectly as their minds had learned to do. The woven screen that had divided their dwelling for months now seemed as distant as childhood memories. Tado stirred, his eyes opening to find her watching him. A slow smile spread across his face, unguarded in a way she'd never seen before. "No regrets?" he asked softly. She shook her head. "None." They returned to the reservation by mid-morning, the stolen government seal hidden safely in Tado's saddlebag. Though nothing in their appearance betrayed the night's intimacies, Nahimana felt as though their changed relationship must be visible to everyone they passed. Chief Nkosi had called a council meeting for noon. Before attending, they stopped at their dwelling to change into fresh clothing. The familiar space felt different now, smaller, warmer, filled with new meaning. "We should move the screen," Tado said, touching the woven divider that had separated their sleeping areas for so long. Nahimana smiled. "Perhaps we should wait. Let the tribe believe our arrangement remains unchanged while we focus on the land dispute." "Always the strategist," he replied, pulling her into a brief embrace before they returned to their public roles. At the council gathering, they reported what they had discovered about the falsified environmental survey, carefully omitting details about how they obtained the information. The tribal elders listened with growing outrage. "They lie on official papers to steal our land." Elder Apache growled. "This confirms what we have always known about the white government's honor." Tado spread their annotated map before the council. "We can challenge them with their own laws. The road construction violates environmental protections they themselves created." "How do we make such a challenge?" Chief Nkosi asked. "We draft a formal objection," Nahamana explained, "using the evidence we've gathered about endangered plants and water contamination risk." The discussion continued, strategies forming. With the stolen government seal, they could create official-looking documents that might delay construction long enough for a proper review. As the council dispersed, Elder Makia approached them. Her eyes, roomy with age but sharp with wisdom, moved between their faces. "Something has changed between you," she observed quietly. Nahamana felt heat rise to her cheeks, but didn't deny it. The old woman had always seen more than others. "It is good," Makia continued. "A marriage should be more than duty." "The tribe still believes we are cousins," Tado replied in a low voice. "The truth of our bloodlines remains hidden." Makia's weathered face creased in confusion. "What truth?" Nahamana explained about the journal they had discovered, about Tado's grandmother arriving already pregnant, about the fiction of shared blood between their families. The elder's expression shifted from confusion to shock. "Who told you this story?" "Tado's father confirmed it," Nahamana replied. "And the journal is wrong," Makia interrupted firmly. "Or perhaps you misunderstood. Your bloodlines are indeed connected, but not as you were told." Tado frowned. "Explain, Elder." Makia glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. "Come to my dwelling tonight. This is not a story for public ears." The day passed in tense anticipation. They drafted their formal objection to the road construction, using the stolen seal to make it appear official. A messenger was dispatched to deliver it to the government office in Waita River. But beneath this work, questions about Makia's revelation simmered. Evening found them seated in the elder's dwelling, the fire casting long shadows on the walls. Makia removed a small wooden box from beneath her sleeping pallet, opening it to reveal yellowed papers and a silver pendant on a leather cord. "The true story of your families is more complicated than either of you know," she began, her voice dropping to just above a whisper. "It begins with two sisters, not brothers." She spread the papers before them, birth records from the mission, hand-drawn family trees, letters in faded ink. "Your great-grandmothers were sisters, separated during a cavalry attack when they were children. One was taken to a reservation in Oklahoma, the other remained here. They found each other again as adults, after both had married." Tado leaned forward, studying the documents. "So we are related, but not as first cousins. Your blood connection is more distant, third cousins, perhaps fourth." The story was simplified over generations. The connection strengthened in telling to honor the sisters' reunion. Nahimana felt relief wash through her. "So our marriage doesn't violate blood taboos?" "No," Makia confirmed, "though that matters less than what has grown between you." She lifted the silver pendant from the box. This belonged to the sisters. One half was worn by each, a symbol of their connection despite separation. She placed the pendant in Nahimana's hands. Two rivers of silver joining to form one stronger flow. "They would be pleased to see their descendants truly united," the old woman said softly. "Not by tribal arrangement, but by choice." Walking home under a sky brilliant with stars, Tado took Nahimana's hand openly, for the first time within tribal boundaries. "Third cousins," he said with a hint of humor. "Distant enough for propriety, close enough to honor tradition. Does it matter now?" she asked. He stopped, turning to face her. "No," he said simply. "What matters is what we've built together, what we've chosen." That night, the woven screen came down. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, the government's response, the tribe's reaction to their growing closeness, they would face them as they now lived undivided. Their official-looking objection bought them 1 week. The government foreman, uncertain about the document's authenticity, but unwilling to risk his position, temporarily halted construction while seeking clarification from his superiors. That week transformed their standing in the tribe. What had begun as a reluctant marriage of obligation had become a powerful alliance. Together they represented a bridge between traditional ways and new knowledge. Nahimana combining Apache healing with modern medicine, Tado applying tribal wisdom to legal strategy. Not everyone welcomed this change. Kizia, Tado's cousin, and a member of the warrior society, watched their growing influence with narrowed eyes. "They think themselves above tribal ways," he remarked to others, as Tado and Nahimana led a group documenting sacred sites along the proposed road path. They returned from the white man's city speaking of papers and laws instead of strength and courage. These whispers spread among the more traditional tribal members. Some elders worried that embracing outside ways would weaken Apache identity. Younger warriors resented Tado's rising influence with the chief. Nahimana sensed the growing resistance. "We should be careful," she told Tado as they prepared for a hunting expedition. "Kizia gathers support against us." Tado adjusted his bow. "He has always resented my father's position. Now he resents mine. This is different," she insisted. "He speaks of us as betrayers of tradition." "Let him speak," Tado replied confidently. "Results will speak louder." The hunting party departed at dawn. Tado, Little Wolf, Kizia, and 2 other warriors. Their goal was deer for the upcoming council feast, where representatives from neighboring Apache bands would discuss a unified response to government encroachment. Nahimana spent the day with her grandmother at the healing lodge, distracted by a sense of unease she couldn't name. When Little Wolf burst in, his face ashen and clothes blood-stained, her worst fears materialized. "Tado is hurt," he gasped. "A hunting accident. He needs you." They had laid him on a travois, his breathing shallow, face gray with pain. An arrow protruded from his upper thigh, the wound already swollen and discolored. "What happened?" Nahimana demanded, examining the injury. We separated to track different deer trails, Little Wolf explained. We heard him cry out and found him like this. Kia stepped forward. He must have startled another hunter from our party who mistook him for game. The explanation seemed plausible, yet something in Kia's expression, a satisfaction poorly concealed, raised Nahimana's suspicions. With Sitala's help, she moved Tado to their dwelling. The arrow had struck no major vessels, but removing it revealed a more serious problem. The arrowhead carried traces of a plant toxin, not a hunting arrow, but one designed to kill enemies. This was no accident, Nahimana whispered to her grandmother as they worked to draw out the poison. Someone wanted him dead. Fever gripped Tado through the night. Nahimana applied poultices of activated charcoal and clay to extract the toxin while administering herbal teas to combat infection. By dawn, his condition had stabilized, though he remained unconscious. Elder Makia arrived with first light, her face grave with concern. "There is talk in the village," she said quietly. "Some say his injury is punishment from the spirits for abandoning traditional ways." "And others?" Nahimana asked, not looking up from her patient. "Others whisper that you have grown too powerful too quickly, that your influence threatens those who have held authority for generations." Nahimana carefully removed a poultice, replacing it with fresh medicine. Makia nodded. "He speaks most loudly, but others listen. Your marriage was meant to join families, not change the tribe's path." Throughout the day, visitors came, some with genuine concern, others clearly assessing whether Tado would survive. Chief Nkosi himself stopped briefly, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts. When Tado finally regained consciousness that evening, Nahimana nearly wept with relief. His voice was weak, but his eyes clear as he gripped her hand. "Not an accident," he murmured. "I know," she replied. "The arrow was poisoned." His expression hardened. "Kikia." He volunteered to be my hunting partner, then suggested we separate. They spoke in whispers, aware that their dwelling might be watched. The attempt on Tado's life represented more than personal enmity. It signified resistance to the changes they embodied. "The road dispute has divided the tribe," Nahimana observed. "Some fear our methods more than they fear losing land. We cannot fight both the government and our own people," Tado replied, wincing as he shifted position. Nahimana refreshed the healing poultice on his wound. "Perhaps we don't need to fight. Perhaps we need to listen. To those who would poison me." His voice held rare bitterness. "To their fears," she clarified. "We've been so focused on applying what we've learned in Phoenix that we've forgotten to translate it into language our people understand." As night deepened around them, they formulated a new approach. The borrowed knowledge from the white world was merely a tool. What mattered was how they applied it to protect Apache values and traditions. "We must show them that embracing new methods doesn't mean abandoning who we are," Nahimana said, stroking Tado's forehead as fever threatened to return. "Tomorrow," he murmured, drifting toward sleep. "Tomorrow we begin to heal the tribe's divisions. Tonight, just heal me." She maintained her vigil throughout the night, aware that dangers now threatened from both within and without. The poison had been meant for Tado, but its true target was the future they represented. A future where Apache identity remained strong while adapting to a changing world. The council fire burned high under a star-filled sky. Representatives from 3 Apache bands had gathered, their faces solemn in the flickering light. The road dispute had escalated beyond their reservation. Government surveyors had been spotted on neighboring tribal lands as well. Tado sat among the warriors, his injured leg stretched before him. 2 weeks had passed since the poisoning, and though he had recovered enough to walk with a staff, weakness still shadowed his movements. Nahimana had taken a place among the women, the silver pendant visible at her throat. Chief Nkosi opened the proceedings with traditional prayers, then addressed the gathering. "We face a common threat to our lands. The white government builds roads that cut through sacred places, destroying what our ancestors protected for generations." Heads nodded in agreement. The chief continued, "Some believe we should fight with weapons, as our fathers did. Others suggest we use the white man's own laws against him. All eyes turned briefly toward Tado and Nahiman. Their official-looking objection had brought temporary reprieve, but word had come that government officials had declared it fraudulent. Construction would resume within days. Kia rose, his tall figure imposing in ceremonial dress. The time for papers and talking is Essa. They ignore our words. We should remind them that Apache warriors still know how to protect what is ours. Approving murmurs followed his statement. Several younger warriors called out in support. Blood will flow if we choose that path, countered Elder Makia. Theirs first, then ours in greater quantity. We are brave, but they have many more guns. Little Wolf spoke next. Taudo and Nahimana have shown there may be another way, using the invaders' own rules against them. Kia's lip curled in derision. And where has this approach brought us? The road construction resumes tomorrow. Their paper tricks have failed. Tension thickened the air. The division within the tribe had grown more pronounced since the attempt on Taudo's life, though no formal accusation had been made against Kia. Without proof, challenging a warrior of his standing would only deepen the fractures. Chief Nokosi held up the ceremonial eagle feather, the talking feather, that gave its holder the right to address the council. Traditionally, it passed only among male leaders and elders. Taudo, the chief, said, "You have studied their laws. What path do you advise?" With effort, Taudo rose, accepting the feather. The white man's laws can be weapons in our hands, but only if we truly understand them. His voice carried strength despite his weakened state. Their own regulations require protection of sacred sites and rare plants. Their courts must enforce these rules if presented with proper evidence. Evidence they ignore. Someone called out, "Because we presented it incorrectly," Taudo acknowledged. "I believed papers with official seals would be enough. I was wrong." The admission silenced the gathering. Taudo continued, "We need more than documents. We need witnesses they cannot dismiss. Their own scientists, their own people of standing, who will speak for our cause. And where do we find these allies?" Chief Nokosi asked. Taudo hesitated, then did something unprecedented. He turned and extended the eagle feather toward Nafina. Shocked murmurs rippled through the assembly. Women did not hold the talking feather in formal council. Yet Taudo stood firm, his eyes meeting his wife's across the fire. After a moment of tense silence, Elder Makia spoke. "Let her speak. She has knowledge we need." Chief Nokosi gave a single grave nod. Nafina rose and crossed to take the feather, aware of every eye upon her. Kaya's face darkened with anger, but he remained silent. "At the nursing school in Phoenix," she began, her voice clear and steady, "I met professors who study plant medicine. They search our lands for healing plants to use in their remedies." She held up a small journal. "I have documented every rare plant species along the proposed road path. With proper introduction, these scientists would testify about their importance." She turned slowly, meeting the eyes of those around the fire. "This is not about abandoning our ways. This is about protecting them, using every tool available, including knowledge from beyond our boundaries." The council remained silent, weighing her words. Finally, a visiting chief from the Western band spoke. "The woman speaks wisdom, but how do we reach these scientists? They will not listen to Apache messengers." Nahimana looked toward Elder Makia, who nodded encouragement. "There is a missionary doctor who visits the reservations. He respects our healing ways and has connections to the university. He could carry our message." Debate erupted, voices rising and falling like wind through canyon walls. Some supported the approach, others, led by Kelia, dismissed it as surrendering to white influence. As the argument intensified, Taudo caught Nahimana's eye and nodded toward Chief Nokosi. Understanding his intent, she approached the chief and returned the eagle feather with appropriate respect. The chief raised his hand for silence. "We have heard many voices. Now we must decide." He looked around the circle. Those who support seeking help from the white scientists and their laws move to my right. Those who believe we should resist directly move to my left. The division was painfully visible. Approximately 2/3 moved right, including most elders and many warriors. The remainder, mostly younger men influenced by Kia, stood defiantly on the left. The majority has spoken, Chief Nokosi declared. We will pursue the path of knowledge while preparing our warriors should that path fail. Tado and Nahimana will lead our approach to the white authorities. Kia's voice cut through the night. You trust our future to a poisoned warrior and a woman who thinks herself a man. This is how Apache strength ends, not defeated by enemies, but weakened from within, by those who forget who they are. The accusation hung in the air, a challenge impossible to ignore. Before Tado could respond, Nahimana stepped forward, her voice steady. We have not forgotten who we are, she said, the firelight illuminating her face. We fight to preserve who we have always been. The only question is whether we will be wise enough to use every weapon available in that fight. The missionary doctor arrived 3 days after the council meeting. Dr. Bennett was an older man with kind eyes and a weathered face that spoke of years under the Arizona sun. Unlike many white men who came to the reservation, he showed genuine respect for Apache ways, often incorporating traditional remedies into his treatments. Remarkable specimens, he murmured, examining the rare plants Nahimana had preserved from the proposed road path. Several are being studied for medicinal properties. This yellow root especially. Early research suggests compounds that may help with heart ailments. Would their destruction concern your scientific colleagues? Tado asked, watching the doctor carefully. Concern? They'd be outraged. Dr. Bennett looked up from the plant specimens. Where exactly were these found? Nahimana unfolded their map, showing the proposed road route. All of these grow within 50 feet of the planned construction. The soil disruption would destroy entire colonies that exist nowhere else in the region. The doctor's expression grew grave. I know several botanists at the university who would testify to their scientific importance, and there's a new federal regulation about environmental impact studies. They can't simply ignore unique ecosystems. Hope kindled as they explained their situation. By evening, Bennett had drafted letters to colleagues and promised to return in 1 week with university scientists, willing to document the rare plants officially. After his departure, a strange quiet fell over the reservation. The divide from the council meeting remained visible in daily life. Those who supported Tado and Nahimana's approach versus those who followed Kia's call for direct resistance. Families that had lived harmoniously for generations now kept distance from one another. We've brought division to the tribe, Nahimana said that night as they sat by their fire. Tado shook his head. The division was already there. We simply brought it into the open. Still, I wonder if we've done more harm than good. She traced the silver pendant at her throat. Perhaps we should have remained as we began, a marriage in name only, each following the path expected of us. Tado moved to sit beside her, taking her hand. Do you truly believe that? No, she admitted softly. But I never imagined our choices would split the tribe. Not our choices, he corrected. The choice between clinging to the past exactly as it was, or finding ways to preserve what matters while adapting to what cannot be changed. They sat in contemplative silence, the firelight playing across their faces. Finally, Tado spoke again, his voice hesitant in a way she rarely heard. When all this is resolved, one way or another, I've been thinking. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Our marriage began as an arrangement. We had no choice in the matter. Nahimana turned to face him, uncertain where his words were leading. I would choose differently now, he continued. If I could go back to the beginning, I would choose you. Not from obligation, but from, he searched for the word, from love. The declaration hung between them, simple yet profound. In their months together, through reluctant coexistence to partnership, to intimacy, they had never spoken directly of love. I would choose you too, she whispered, her voice catching. I do choose. Something shifted in that moment, the last transformation of their relationship, from arrangement to genuine union. Tado rose and moved to his hunting pack, returning with something held carefully in his palm. In the old days, he said, before missionaries brought their metal rings, Apache couples would exchange tokens of their choosing. He opened his hand to reveal a delicate circle woven from sweet grass. I made this today, thinking of what might have been if we had come together by choice rather than obligation. Nahimana's eyes filled with tears as he slipped the braided ring onto her finger. The sweet grass carried the faint scent of summer meadows, of freedom and possibility. Should we speak the traditional words? She asked. Our own words, he suggested. This is our choosing, not the tribe. Under the witness of fire and stars, they spoke simple vows, promises of partnership, respect and love that came from their hearts rather than tribal expectation. When they kissed to seal their private ceremony, it felt like a true beginning. Morning brought news that government workers had returned to the sacred rocks, resuming preparations for road construction. The tribal response was immediate. Warriors led by Little Wolf established a constant presence at the site, monitoring activities without direct confrontation. Nahimana organized teams to document every plant, water source and sacred location that would be affected, building the evidence they would need. Through it all, Tado and Nahimana moved with new purpose. The sweet trace ring remained on her finger, visible to all, yet its significance known only to them. A private affirmation in the midst of public struggle. 1 week stretched into 2, as they awaited Dr. Bennett's return. Tension built as construction equipment arrived at the site. Kaguya and his followers grew increasingly restless, arguing that delay only weakened their position. We should drive them away now, he insisted during an evening gathering, before their machines tear open the earth and bring soldiers down upon us. Tado countered, we must give our strategy time to work. The confrontation might have escalated further, if not for the arrival of a messenger from the village lookout. Riders approaching, he announced. The doctor has returned, and he brings many white men with him. Sunrise painted the eastern hills golden as Nahimana stood at the edge of their garden, watching the young sapling catch first light. 1 year had passed since the road dispute, a year of profound change for the tribe and for her marriage. Dr. Bennett's return with university botanists and a government environmental inspector had marked the turning point. The scientists had documented the rare plant species, officially confirming what the tribe had always known: the land held treasures found nowhere else. The inspector, initially skeptical, had been unable to ignore the evidence of falsified surveys in the original road plans. Construction had halted, pending a complete environmental review. 3 months later, a new route was approved, circumventing the sacred rocks and the most sensitive ecological areas. It was not a complete victory. The road would still cross tribal land, but the most important sites had been preserved. The compromise had not satisfied everyone. Kia and a small group of followers had left the reservation, joining a more traditional band in the mountains. Their departure had been bitter, marked by accusations of betrayal and abandonment of the old ways. Yet for most of the tribe, the resolution had brought unexpected benefits. The university had established a research partnership with the tribal council, creating opportunities for Apache youth to study both traditional knowledge and modern science. Nahimana now led this program, dividing her time between the reservation and Phoenix. Tado's footsteps approached from behind, his morning routine of checking their home's perimeter completed. His leg had healed completely, though he hailed it still ached before rain. You're up early, he said, wrapping his arms around her waist. She leaned back against his chest. I wanted to see if the sapling had grown overnight. He chuckled, the sound vibrating against her back. Trees have more patience than humans. The sapling had been his gift to her 6 months earlier, planted to mark their decision to build a life that honored both tradition and change. Its roots stretched deep into Apache soil, while its branches reached toward new possibilities, much like the path they had chosen. The council meets today, she reminded him, though he surely hadn't forgotten. He acknowledged. Elder Makia says it's time to formalize the educational program. Since recovering from her illness, Makia had become their strongest ally, advocating for selective integration of outside knowledge while maintaining core Apache values. Under her guidance, the tribe had established new protocols for dealing with government authorities, neither complete resistance nor blind acceptance, but strategic engagement. "And you?" Nahimana asked. "Are you ready for your announcement?" Tado had spent months studying tribal legal history, documenting treaties and agreements dating back generations. Today he would propose creating a tribal legal council to protect Apache rights, using both traditional wisdom and American law. "As ready as one can be to challenge centuries of tradition," he replied with a wry smile. They walked back to their dwelling together, the morning air sweet with pine and possibility. Their home had transformed over the past year, the woven screen long gone, the space filled instead with books, maps and mementos of their journey. A small desk near the window held Nahimana's medical journals alongside Tado's legal documents, their different worlds now comfortably intertwined. As they prepared for the council meeting, Nahimana felt a familiar flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with nervousness about the day ahead. For weeks, she had carried a secret, waiting for the right moment to share it. "I have news," she said, as Tado fastened the ceremonial vest he wore for council gatherings. He turned, raising an eyebrow in question. "The changes we've brought to the tribe aren't the only new beginnings." She took his hand, placing it gently against her abdomen. "There will be another in spring." His expression transformed, surprise, wonder, joy flooding his features. "A child, you're certain?" She nodded, her own joy mirrored in his eyes. "Grandmother confirmed it yesterday. She says it will be a girl." Tado pulled her close, his embrace gentle as if she had suddenly become fragile. "A daughter," he whispered against her hair, "to carry forward what we've started." The moment stretched between them, perfect in its simplicity. From reluctant arrangement to genuine love, their journey had come full circle, creating family by choice rather than obligation. Later, they walked together to the council gathering. The tribal center buzzed with activity, elders discussing traditional ceremonies, while younger members prepared educational materials for the new combined learning program. Children played nearby, some in traditional dress, others in modern clothing, all moving easily between both worlds. Elder Mekia greeted them at the entrance, her roomy eyes bright with knowing. "The future arrives," she said cryptically, her gaze dropping briefly to Nahimana's midsection. "How did you know?" Nahimana asked, surprised. The old woman smiled. "I was a healer before you were born, child. I recognized the glow of new life." She patted Tata's arm. "Your daughter will walk in two worlds with sure feet, thanks to the path you have cleared." As they took their places in the council circle, Nahimana caught Tata's eye across the fire. The reluctant warrior, forced to marry his cousin, had become a tribal leader, working to preserve Apache sovereignty through knowledge rather than weapons. The educated woman who had resented tribal constraints now used her learning to strengthen those same traditions for future generations. Neither had chosen their beginning, but together they had transformed it into something neither could have imagined alone. A marriage not just of two people, but of past and future, of tradition and innovation, of roots and wings.